Welcome back to the final episode of our Christmas edition of Secrets from the Ancient Path. I'm Andy Cook. Thanks for joining us. We've been letting the Land of the Bible share with us some new insight about a story we love and a story we obviously know very well already. But you know, parts of any Bible story can't be fully comprehended until you connect with the land of the Bible. And that's the case when you open up Matthew's Gospel or Luke's Gospel and you're reading about the Christmas story. It's really very important, if you possibly can, to walk the path that Mary and Joseph walked, to see what they saw in order to fully comprehend the amazing miracle of Christmas. So come with me one final time as we journey through the land of the Bible to understand the Christmas story a bit better this year. Perhaps as we do, we'll have a new way of celebrating Christmas and become better followers of Jesus all year long. Today, it's what you might call the after story. Jesus was born, and it was just the beginning. We know what happened in the next few days. We know what happened in the next few months, right on up to a couple of years. We've got details of the story as Mary and Joseph make a flight to Egypt and then finally return to Nazareth. But first, there was a visit to Jerusalem. And that's where we're going today as Jesus makes his first visit to the city that would become so important in his life. It's likely Mary and Joseph did not stay in the cave where Jesus was born for very long. As soon as possible, Joseph would have secured better lodging for his new family, and the Bible tells us that they were in a house when the Magi came to visit later. When he was 8 days old, Jesus was circumcised at home, probably by Joseph. And on day 40, Joseph, Mary, and the infant made the 5-mile walk to Jerusalem for Mary's rite of ritual purification. As they neared the Temple Mount, Mary would have bathed in a mikvah, a ritual washing pool. Joseph, too, would have gone through the ritual washing before venturing to the top of the Temple Mount, where the grandest temple in Jewish history stood waiting for them. The temple Mary and Joseph saw must have been breathtaking. Construction had been completed a few years earlier, though the work on the temple and the Temple Mount continued until 63 A.D. But just as Jesus would later prophesy, the temple was destroyed stone by stone in 70 A.D., only 7 years after its official completion date and just 40 years after Jesus had made his prophetic warning. Today's Temple Mount has the same footprint, though the temple has been replaced by the Islamic Dome of the Rock. Evidence of the destruction from AD 70 lies at the base of the western side of the Temple Mount retaining wall today, and the lowest stones of the famous western wall bear the unmistakable markings of Herod's construction. Smaller stones on top of the Herodian stones represent efforts to repair the Temple Mount walls in the centuries that followed the era of the New Testament. At the temple, the young couple made the required offering for Mary's firstborn son, and then encountered two people who gave them special words of encouragement. An old man named Simeon was moved by the Spirit as he saw the child. He took Jesus in his arms and praised God, saying, "Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all nations, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel." Just as Mary and Joseph were absorbing those words, Simon blessed them and warned them. This child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. In roughly 33 years, Jesus would return to Jerusalem one final time, where his actions on that very Temple Mount would have the entire city in an uproar. He was the most popular religious teacher in Israel and therefore extremely powerful. He was a threat to the religious authorities. But by the end of that week, Mary would lay crumpled at the foot of the cross, a sword of grief piercing her heart, just as old Simeon had promised. But just as Simeon was finished speaking to the couple about what was yet to come, a prophetess named Anna came up to them and joined in the special moment. She too gave thanks to God for the child, speaking on behalf of all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. It must have been an unforgettable day, leaving Mary and Joseph much to ponder in the weeks ahead. After all that activity in Jerusalem, Mary and Joseph returned to Bethlehem for a good length of time. Now, there are three clues from Scripture that lead us to believe they might have intended to stay in Bethlehem for the rest of their lives. First, Matthew's account of the birth of Jesus features some visiting magi who come to see him. Maybe you've heard of the wise men who come. Matthew tells us that these magi, and they were really, really smart, came to see Jesus while the young family was in a house. Obviously, the emergency housing where Jesus had been born in a cave had been only a temporary place of living. The family was now, when the Magi get there, in some kind of permanent structure, and they had been there for several months. The second clue we get that they might have wanted to stay in Bethlehem was that Herod would order the death of all the little boys in Bethlehem and the surrounding villages who were 2 years old and younger. So there's some logic to say Herod figured out the timing of the star, the visit of the Magi, and perhaps some of the local reports from Bethlehem that the child might be as old as 2. Even if he was just stretching the age to cover all the needed murders, as horrible as that seems, it's obvious Jesus was not a newborn infant anymore. They had been in Bethlehem for a while. Perhaps they intended to stay for a long time. And third, and perhaps the most obvious clue that they might have wanted to live in Bethlehem, was that on their way home from Egypt, Mary and Joseph discussed returning to Bethlehem. But when they heard that Archelaus, the son of Herod the Great, was ruling in Jerusalem, they decided it would be safer to go back to Nazareth, no matter what the price tag might have been for them personally. Archelaus was so cruel, the Romans pretty much fired him. They got rid of him and put a governor in to rule the city of Jerusalem. And it's because of that move that eventually Pontius Pilate would be the governor of Jerusalem about 3 decades later. Now, you might be asking, why is all of this important? Why would we spend time with this at Christmas? Because the people of that day in that particular place had been waiting on the Messiah for a long, long time. They had been paying close attention to all the details in the Bible of what Scripture had been promising them. And Micah, one of the prophets, had said the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Hosea had said, "Out of Egypt I will call my son." It's possible to interpret that verse to referring to the Exodus event, but Matthew reflects on the mood of the people of his day who applied that passage to the Messiah. Matthew definitely saw the fulfillment of prophecy in Jesus coming out of Egypt as part of proof that he was the Messiah. Isaiah had said was one of several prophets who used the word branch to speak of the coming Messiah. And Matthew picked up on the branch language when Jesus moved to Nazareth. The Hebrew word for branch, Netzir, has in its very name the fact that Nazareth was, you could say, kind of a nickname, branch town. Life was so desperate, so difficult under Roman rule. The people were looking in Scripture, begging God to send the Messiah, and they were looking for every clue from the Scripture, and that's what you see in the Gospels over and over again as people refer to the prophecies about his life, about his death, about his resurrection, and yes, even in his birth. The fact that Jesus had been born in Bethlehem, that he came out of Egypt, that he'd been raised in Nazareth, branch town, for the branch, the Messiah. Listen, it was all too much for them. They said all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together in what would have been impossible if any human being had tried to orchestrate this. Only God could have done this. I pray that's part of the reason you're here watching this video, that something about, as you've read the Scripture, as you've considered the gift of Christmas, as you looked at the prophecies around the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the prophecies around his birth, that's made a difference in your life, and you understand the peace that he brings in a personal way. That's the gift of Christmas. And I pray it's a gift that you know personally, and I pray it's a gift that you want to share with everyone you know. It's the greatest gift that's ever been given to any human being in any Christmas. And that could be the gift of this Christmas. Oh, thanks so much for joining us for this special Christmas edition of The Secrets from the Ancient Past. There have been 5 of these. If you're just catching up with us, you can go back and look at more of the story, how Mary and Joseph begin their story in Nazareth. They walked, journeyed on that very difficult journey all the way to Bethlehem, about the domination of Herod the Great, and finally to see Bethlehem and to see one of those caves outside of Bethlehem, to see the amazing stark contrast between Herod and Jesus. It's so much that brings the story to life. And I want to thank you for being with us on this particular journey, this particular Christmas. I hope you join us again. We've got more lessons coming up. We've already been through several lessons. If you want to see what we've already done, check out secretsfromtheancientpast.com or look on any podcasting platform for Secrets from the Ancient Past. I hope you'll join us again. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Andy Cook.